In recent press briefings, U.S. leadership projected total confidence. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth stated the administration's mission is firm. The U.S. blockade is a growing global success, and the military is prepared to maintain it as long as it takes. But that confidence doesn't match the immediate physical fallout. Global aviation is facing a severe jet fuel crisis. Thousands of commercial routes have already been canceled, leaving massive fleets of planes sitting idle on tarmacs worldwide. The disruption is moving right into the base of the global economy. Crucial shipments of fertilizers and petrochemicals are stalled, driving up costs for farmers today and setting the stage for a massive agricultural shortfall projected to hit by 2027. If the United States is the undisputed global superpower, its successful blockade should be weakening the enemy, not breaking the very domestic and global supply chains America depends on. To justify the ongoing operation, the administration is leaning on a new historical narrative. Officials now argue they are simply reacting to 47 years of unprovoked Iranian aggression. That timeline ignores a much longer history of intervention. Hostilities actually trace back to 1953, when a US-backed coup overthrew Iran's government, triggering decades of blowback and revolution. More recently, the US chose to discard a working diplomatic solution. In 2018, the administration unilaterally shredded the JCPOA, a complex nuclear agreement that, at the time, was successfully limiting Iran's nuclear capabilities through international inspections. That exit wasn't driven by a failure of the deal itself, but by intense external political pressure. For years, Israeli leadership campaigned for the US to abandon diplomacy in favor of direct confrontation. Because the US chose to walk away from a functioning agreement, this blockade is a war of choice, a conflict built on manufactured bravado that has trapped American forces in a strategic corner. Focusing on a regional naval campaign overlooks the immediate strategic problem. What happens if a peer competitor, like China or Russia, decides to test US resolve elsewhere tomorrow? This chart shows the rate at which the US is destroying its own readiness. Since February, the military fired roughly 1,100 stealth cruise missiles, half the inventory reserved for the Pacific. The Pentagon expended 1,200 Patriot interceptors, consuming these $4 million shields at an unsustainable rate. Additionally, over 1,000 Tomahawks were launched, wiping out 10 years of peacetime production. We are watching highly complex, expensive weapons being casually expended out at sea. These aren't assets that can be replaced by flipping a switch. Our industrial base takes years to scale up production of high-end munitions. The math is undeniable. America has shattered its own capacity to fight a major two-front war. By exhausting its interceptors and stealth weapons here, the military has left itself dangerously vulnerable to actual peer competitors. To project strength, the US has deployed 3 massive carrier strike groups to the region. It is an overwhelming display of physical scale, meant to signal that the US controls the waves. But an aircraft carrier is only as powerful as its magazine. Without a deep reserve of offensive and defensive missiles, these massive ships become sitting targets in a prolonged engagement. Despite claims of destroying 78% of Iranian military targets, there has been no surrender. This failure suggests that conventional attrition cannot force an opponent to their knees if they are prepared to suffer for years. A hollow armada sitting in the ocean does not project true power. It only drains American resources and leaves the military trapped in an unwinnable stalemate. The strategic trap extends directly into the global economy. This map highlights the Strait of Hormuz, where 14 million barrels of oil are bottlenecked daily. While leaders claim domestic drilling can fill the gap, US producers can realistically only increase output by 3 million barrels. You can see the physical result of this gridlock out on the water. Massive oil tankers are sitting completely stationary, unable to safely move through the world's most critical energy passage. By cordoning off this passage, the US has inadvertently turned its blockade into a self-embargo, strangling the global trade network it helped build. Even if a ceasefire were signed this afternoon, shipping wouldn't resume. Global trade is currently caught in an insurance deadlock. Maritime insurance models rely on rare, isolated accidents. When there is a sustained risk of ships being sunk or burned, underwriters simply refuse to insure the voyage. It will take months of quiet before companies are willing to risk their assets in these waters again. Experts like John Mearsheimer warn that we are flirting with economic conditions not seen since the 1930s. With oil executives telling the Dallas Fed they expect constraints to last through August, the compounding damage to energy and food prices could rapidly shift a severe recession into a full-scale economic depression. This entire crisis stems from the decision to walk away from a functioning nuclear deal in 2018. That choice has now metastasized, draining U.S. military readiness and threatening global stability. Real power is measured in math and industrial capacity, not rhetoric. Wars of choice consume the very resources needed for national defense. And if the U.S. continues to ignore these physical limits, it will lose a war it started simply because it ran out of the means to fight it.